Trump put a 25% tariff on Canada's most important agricultural export. And within days, American farmers were screaming, fertilizer prices were spiking, and the White House quietly walked it back. What happened in between tells you everything about who actually holds the leverage. If you've never heard of potash, you're about to understand why it's more strategically important to the United States than almost anything else coming across that northern border. Hit subscribe right now, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, and stay until the end, because this story gets wilder with every layer you peel back. Let's start with the basics, because the basics alone are shocking. Potash is a potassium-based mineral. It is one of 3 essential nutrients, alongside nitrogen and phosphorus, that crops need to grow. Without it, yields collapse. You don't get the corn, the soybeans, the wheat. You don't get the cattle feed. You don't get the food on American tables. It is not optional. It is not replaceable with something cheaper. It is a fundamental input to the entire agricultural supply chain of the United States. And here is the number that matters. The U.S. imports roughly 90% of the potash it consumes. Of that, Canada supplies somewhere between 80 and 90%. In 2024, the U.S. imported approximately 12 million tons of potash from Canada alone, almost all of it dug out of one province, Saskatchewan. Let that land for a second. The most powerful economy in the world depends on a single Canadian province for the fertilizer that feeds its people. Now enter Donald Trump, March 2025. As part of his sweeping tariff offensive against Canada, framed publicly as pressure over border security and fentanyl, Trump slaps a 25% tariff on most Canadian imports. Potash is included. On paper, it sounds like standard trade war maneuvering. In practice, it is one of the most self-defeating economic moves in recent U.S. agricultural history. And the reason comes down to something every finance professional understands immediately. Who actually bears the cost of a tariff depends entirely on who has the leverage. Here's the critical distinction that most people missed. When the U.S. imposes tariffs on a product it can source elsewhere, or produce domestically, the exporting country bears the pressure. They either lower their prices to stay competitive, or they lose market share. That's how tariffs are supposed to work as negotiating tools. But potash is the opposite situation. Canada doesn't need to lower its price because the U.S. has nowhere else to go at scale. As Josh Linville, Vice President of Fertilizer at StoneX, stated directly, Canada supplies nearly 90% of U.S. potash imports, and there are virtually no viable alternatives. So what happens? Canada says, "You want the product? You pay our price plus your own tariff." The cost lands entirely on the American buyer. In this case, that means American farmers. And that is exactly what happened. The U.S. Import Price Index for chemical fertilizers moved from 164.5 in December 2024 to 186.5 by September 2025. That is a 13.4% increase in less than a year. The U.S. Prices Paid Index, which tracks actual costs absorbed by American farmers, rose to 149.9 by mid-2025, up from 139.9 the prior year. Fertilizer costs were the single largest driver of rising farm expenses in 2025, up 11% in the index. These aren't abstract financial metrics. These are the numbers that determine whether a corn farmer in Iowa turns a profit or operates at a loss. These are the numbers that eventually translate into grocery prices in every American city. The political blowback was swift, and it was loud. The American farm lobby, one of the most organized and politically connected industries in the country, and a core constituency of Trump's base, pushed back hard. They didn't need economic reports. They could feel it in their input costs in real time. What happened next was telling. The 25% tariff on potash was walked back to 10%. Then the White House acknowledged that potash fell under USMCA, the trade agreement Trump himself had renegotiated, and dropped the tariff to 0. The entire escalation reversed itself within weeks. That retreat wasn't driven by diplomatic goodwill from Canada. It was driven by arithmetic. The math simply didn't work in Washington's favor, and the farm lobby made sure the White House understood that clearly. But here's what that reversal actually revealed, and this is the part that should concern every American watching from an economic standpoint. It revealed that the U.S. has a genuine structural vulnerability in its agricultural supply chain. Not a temporary one, a deep, geological, decades-in-the-making vulnerability. The reason Canada dominates global potash isn't politics. It isn't trade deals. It's geology. Saskatchewan sits on top of one of the largest potash deposits on Earth. Canada holds 1.1 billion tons of potash reserves, 5 times larger than U.S. reserves. And the production gap is even more extreme. Canada's potash mining output is 36 times larger than American domestic production. The entire U.S. domestic potash industry is essentially two companies, Intrepid Potash and Mosaic's New Mexico operations. Combined, they cannot come close to meeting American demand. Fertilizer Canada made this point bluntly in 2025. The United States does not have sufficient reserves to meet domestic demand, regardless of how aggressively Trump tries to stimulate domestic production through tariffs or subsidies. A mine takes years to permit, years to build, and requires the right geology to begin with. You can't tariff your way to a new potash deposit. That's not how the earth works. So the question that started forming in Washington around mid-2025 was uncomfortable but unavoidable. If Canada can't be pressured, and domestic production can't fill the gap, where does the U.S. turn? The answer to that question is what makes this story go from a trade dispute into something that touches geopolitics, authoritarian regimes, and the future of American food security all at once. Because the only two countries with the scale to even partially replace Canadian potash supply are Russia and Belarus. And that's where this gets very dark, very fast. Russia and Belarus. Those are the names that came up when American trade strategists started wargaming a world without Canadian potash. Let that context sit for a moment, because the United States, in the middle of supporting Ukraine against a Russian invasion, was now quietly evaluating whether it needed to open supply lines to Moscow's closest allies just to keep American cornfields fertilized. That is not a hypothetical scenario. That is exactly what unfolded between late 2025 and early 2026. But before getting to the geopolitical chess moves, understand the market reality that forced Washington's hand. Russia and Belarus together produce roughly 37.5% of the world's potash. Belarus alone, through its state-owned company Belaruskali, one of the largest potash producers on the planet, was a dominant global supplier before Western sanctions hit in 2021. Those sanctions came after Lukashenko's regime violently cracked down on pro-democracy protesters following a disputed 2020 election. The US, Canada, and the European Union collectively froze Belarus out of the global financial system and cut off its potash exports. At the time, it was the right geopolitical call. Belarus was earning roughly $2.4 billion annually from potash exports, about 8% of total national exports and 4% of GDP. Cutting that off was designed to economically suffocate a dictatorship. It worked, partially, but it also removed a significant volume of potash from global markets, volume that Saskatchewan stepped in to fill for American buyers. Now fast forward to 2025. Trump starts a tariff war with Canada. The farm lobby erupts. The White House backs down. But the underlying strategic problem doesn't go away. If Trump ever wanted real leverage over Canada, if he ever wanted to credibly threaten to walk away from Canadian potash, he needed an alternative. Without one, every tariff threat was a bluff Canada could call. And Canada's own officials knew it. Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe met with U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. Both men, according to Moe, privately told him they did not want tariffs on fertilizer because it would drive up costs for American farmers. The message from Washington's own cabinet was, "We don't actually want to do this. That's not leverage. That's capitulation dressed up as diplomacy." So the strategic calculation inside the Trump administration shifted. If you want leverage over Canada on potash, you need a credible backup supplier. And the only candidates at scale were Russia and Belarus. Russia's exports to the U.S. already accounted for 8 to 10% of total American potash demand, a smaller but existing supply relationship. But Belarus was the bigger prize. Belaruskali's production capacity was massive. Getting Belarus back into the American supply chain would give Washington something it currently lacked entirely, an alternative it could point to. And then, in December 2025, it happened. Trump's special envoy to Belarus, John Cole, arrived in Minsk for 2 days of direct talks with Alexander Lukashenko, the same Lukashenko that the entire Western world had been sanctioning and isolating for 5 years. The deal that came out of those meetings was striking. Belarus released 123 political prisoners, including Nobel Peace Prize laureate Ales Bialyatsky and prominent opposition leader Maria Kolesnikova. In return, the United States lifted sanctions on Belarusian potash, specifically on Belaruskali and the Belarusian Potash Company. Cole stood in Minsk and said on camera, "Per the instructions of President Trump, the United States will be lifting sanctions on potash." Strategically, from a pure supply chain standpoint, the logic is visible. The U.S. classified potash as a critical mineral for agriculture and national security. Opening a Belarusian supply channel diversifies import sources and reduces the all-or-nothing dependency on Canada. It gives trade negotiators something real to threaten when they sit across from Canadian officials. And it delivered a foreign policy win. Prisoner releases, including an American Nobel laureate, that the White House could point to publicly. But here's where the financial and geopolitical analysis gets complicated, because this deal carries costs that go well beyond the potash market. First, the logistics reality. Canada and the United States share a border. Saskatchewan potash travels by rail directly into American distribution networks. The infrastructure is built, optimized, and cheap. Belarus is approximately 8,000 kilometers away by sea. Belarusian potash would need to travel through Russian ports, since Lithuania cut off rail access to its port of Klaipėda in 2022, cross an ocean, hit American coastal ports, and then travel inland by rail or truck to reach the farming heartland. Matt Simpson, CEO of Brazil Potash, laid this out clearly. Transportation costs from Belarus would be dramatically higher than from Canada. That cost doesn't disappear. It lands on American farmers and eventually American consumers. The price of replacing Canadian proximity is not trivial. Second, the sanctions complexity. European sanctions on Belarusian potash remain fully in place. The U.S. acted unilaterally. That fractures Western economic coordination, the same coordination that has been central to pressuring both Belarus and Russia since 2022. Critics, including exiled Belarusian opposition leader Franak Viachorka, warned immediately that lifting potash sanctions risks feeding revenue back into a regime that is still actively hosting Russian military infrastructure and facilitating the war in Ukraine. The U.S. is simultaneously funding Ukraine's defense and reopening cash flows to the country that helped make the invasion possible. That contradiction is not lost on European allies, and it introduces political friction that extends well beyond agricultural commodity markets. Third, and most importantly from a market standpoint, the Belarus move does not actually solve America's potash dependency problem. It adds a secondary supplier with higher logistics costs, geopolitical risk, and no guarantee of long-term stability. Belarusian potash, priced in late 2025 at approximately $305 to $310 per ton, was competitive on paper, but factoring in freight, port costs, and inland transportation, the landed cost in America's agricultural Midwest would be materially higher than Canadian supply. It's a leverage play, not a solution. The real solution, domestic production, remains a decade away at minimum. The USDA gave a $14 million grant to Sage Potash to study a Utah deposit with a potential 300,000 ton per year output. Canada's Nutrien alone operates at over 20 million tons of annual capacity across 6 Saskatchewan mines. The gap is not closing anytime soon. So here is where the United States actually stands right now, stripped of the political noise and the trade war theater. The world's largest agricultural economy, a country that feeds not just itself but significant portions of the globe, is structurally dependent on a foreign nation for one of the 3 minerals without which large-scale farming is impossible. Every tariff threat against Canada on potash has reversed itself. Every alternative supply route carries higher costs, greater geopolitical risk, or both. And the domestic production gap is so large that no realistic policy timeline closes it within this decade. That is not a negotiating position. That is a vulnerability. And the financial consequences of mismanaging that vulnerability are already showing up in data that directly affects ordinary Americans. Consumer inflation in the U.S. hit 3% by late 2025, a level not seen since early 2024, driven substantially by rising input costs across the agricultural supply chain. Manufacturing employment, including in politically sensitive industries, dropped by nearly 50,000 jobs in 2025. University of Michigan consumer sentiment data showed confidence sitting at half-century lows, with 4 of the 10 worst monthly readings recorded after Trump's Liberation Day tariff announcements in April. These are not isolated data points. They are connected. When you increase the cost of fertilizer, you increase the cost of growing food. When you increase the cost of growing food, you increase grocery prices. When grocery prices rise persistently, consumer confidence drops and household budgets compress. The chain from Saskatchewan potash mines to an Iowa farmer's income statement to a Chicago family's grocery bill is shorter and more direct than most people realize. Now zoom out further, because this story doesn't end at America's borders. Global potash demand is forecast to reach 74 to 77 million tons by 2026, up from current levels. Supply is also expanding. Canada's BHP Jansen mine, a $14 billion project, begins its first phase of production in mid-2027, adding approximately 4 million tons per year to global capacity. K&S's Bethune mine in Saskatchewan is already in an expansion program targeting 4 million tons annually. Nutrien, the world's largest potash producer, born from the 2018 merger of Potash Corporation of Saskatchewan and Agrium, operates 6 low-cost mines with over 20 million tons of annual capacity. The supply side of the global potash market is getting larger, not smaller. That matters for price, and it matters for American negotiating position, because a world with more potash supply eventually gives buyers more options. But that world is years away. Right now, in 2026, Canada is irreplaceable at scale, and every credible analyst in the fertilizer market knows it. Here is the part that should concern American voters and investors equally. The strategic miscalculation in Washington's approach to Canadian potash wasn't just economic. It was a failure of supply chain intelligence at the highest level of trade policy. When the Trump administration rolled out its 25% tariff on Canadian imports in March 2025, potash was treated as just another line item in a broad trade offensive. It wasn't analyzed with the specificity its strategic importance demanded. The farm lobby had to force the correction from the outside. That is a dangerous way to manage dependencies in critical mineral supply chains. Reactive rather than strategic, driven by political pressure rather than preemptive analysis. Compare that to how the U.S. has handled semiconductor dependency since 2022. After recognizing the Taiwan concentration risk in chip manufacturing, Washington passed the CHIPS Act, committed over $52 billion in domestic investment, and began systematically building alternative supply chains. The strategic framework was clear. Identify the dependency, quantify the risk, fund the solution. Potash has received nothing remotely comparable in terms of policy seriousness. A $14 million feasibility grant to study a Utah mine is not a supply chain strategy. It is a press release. What a serious potash strategy would actually look like is straightforward from a finance and policy perspective. It would start with a long-term domestic investment framework, not tariffs that raise costs today, but subsidized mine development, permitting reform, and infrastructure investment that begins closing the production gap over 10 to 15 years. It would involve locking in long-term supply agreements with Canada at stable prices, treating Saskatchewan the way the U.S. treats Gulf oil producers, as a strategic partner whose supply continuity is a national interest, not a negotiating chip. And it would involve genuine supply diversification, not a rushed deal with a Lukashenko dictatorship for geopolitical optics, but patient development of alternative sources in stable jurisdictions, including potential deposits in Brazil, Ethiopia, and elsewhere that are currently at various stages of exploration. None of that is happening at the pace or scale the strategic reality demands. The Belarus deal, whatever its diplomatic merits on prisoner releases, does not change the fundamental equation. Belarusian potash cannot replace Canadian potash logistically, economically, or at volume. Not in 2026, not in 2027, not in the near term. Russia remains a politically radioactive supply source for obvious reasons. Domestic U.S. production remains a rounding error next to national demand. And Canada, specifically Saskatchewan, continues to sit on the largest, most accessible, most cost-efficient potash reserves that American agriculture depends on. The leverage, in other words, was never in Washington's hands to begin with, and the tariff reversal proved it in real time in front of the entire world. What this story ultimately illustrates, and this is the finance lesson that cuts across every trade dispute, every commodity dependency, every supply chain decision, is that economic leverage flows to whoever controls the irreplaceable input. It doesn't matter how large your economy is. It doesn't matter how loud your tariff announcements are. If the other side has something you cannot function without and cannot quickly replace, they hold the leverage. Saskatchewan understood that. Washington learned it the hard way. The farmer in Kansas paying 11% more for fertilizer in 2025 didn't cause this problem, but he absorbed the cost of it. And unless American trade policy starts treating critical mineral supply chains with the same seriousness it treats semiconductors, defense procurement, and energy infrastructure, he'll keep absorbing it. Potash is not a niche commodity story. It is a food security story. It is a national security story. And right now, the United States is on the wrong side of it. If this breakdown gave you a sharper picture of how commodity dependencies shape geopolitics and hit your wallet directly, subscribe. Share this with someone who thinks trade wars are abstract. And drop a comment below. Do you think Washington will ever build a serious domestic potash strategy? Or will the U.S. remain dependent on Canada indefinitely? The conversation in the comments is always worth reading. See you in the next one.